When Clint Eastwood walked into one of the most prestigious restaurants in Chicago, dressed in a simple polo shirt and trousers, no one recognized the famous actor and director. That's when the overconfident waitress Emily made the biggest mistake of her career, trying to kick out and humiliate a man she thought was just an ordinary elderly customer. It was a typical Friday evening at Golden Vine. The recently renovated dining room was filled with Chicago's elite, young tech moguls in expensive suits, bloggers photographing their platinum desserts, and families maintaining their traditions. Among them, sitting at his usual corner table, was a man in a gray polo shirt and casual trousers, quietly sipping whiskey. Most of the experienced staff, of course, recognized him. How could they not? But 6 months ago, when Clint Eastwood quietly purchased Golden Vine, he gave them strict instructions. Treat him like any other customer during his periodic quality checks. He believed that the true value of a restaurant lay not in how it treated celebrities, but in how it treated ordinary people. Emily, the newest waitress at the restaurant, knew nothing about this. Fresh out of a prestigious hospitality school and building her following as a food blogger, she spent her shifts alternating between fawning over influencers and casting disdainful glances at the casually dressed man in her section. Michael, the longtime manager, watched nervously from across the room. He had seen that look in Emily's eyes before, the same look she had given last week to a retired surgeon who dared to wear loafers instead of dress shoes. But tonight was different. Tonight, her judgment would have consequences she couldn't even imagine. As Emily approached Clint's table, Michael held his breath. The veteran staff tensed, sensing the calm before the storm. The quiet man in the polo shirt simply took another sip of his whiskey, a faint smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Emily positioned herself at the table, her iPhone slightly visible in her apron pocket, her practiced smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Sir," she began, "I couldn't help but notice you've been nursing that whiskey for quite a while now. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the bar. We're expecting several VIP guests at this table." She gestured to the pristine white tablecloth, reserved for honored guests. "I am comfortable here," Clint replied simply, taking another unhurried sip. Emily slightly lost her composure. She glanced at her watch, then at a group of young tech entrepreneurs waiting at the host stand. "Sir, our chef prepares an exclusive menu. The prices," she paused, eyeing his casual attire, "reflect the caliber of our establishment." At the next table, an elderly couple who had been regulars for 20 years shifted uncomfortably. The husband started to speak up, but his wife stopped him, recognizing the look in Clint's eyes, the same look that had preceded some of cinema's most memorable moments. "I am aware of the prices," Clint said quietly, his voice carrying the same confidence as in his films, "and the chef's work." Emily completely lost her smile. She sharply pulled out her order pad. "Well then, sir, shall I explain the menu slowly?" Her words carried a clear jab at his age. Carlos, a young busboy who had immigrated from Guatemala 2 years ago and worked tirelessly to support his family, couldn't take it anymore. He stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Miss Emily, maybe I should get Michael?" "Stay out of this," Emily snapped at him. "Go bus tables. That's what you are here for." She turned back to Clint, who had been watching the exchange with particular interest. "Sir, one last time, the tension in the dining room was palpable. This isn't some diner off the highway. This is Golden Vine. Perhaps in your day things were different, but now we have standards." Clint slowly set his whiskey glass down on the table. The movement was subtle, but it commanded more attention than Emily's outburst. Some of the older patrons recognized it, the same calm before some of cinema's most iconic moments. "In my day," he repeated softly, raising an eyebrow slightly. "Yes, your day," Emily continued, fully unleashing months of pent-up disdain for unfashionable customers. When people could just walk in anywhere, dress however they wanted, order the cheapest drink, and take up space meant for real guests, times have changed. This is a place for those who appreciate modern luxury. Carlos stopped pretending to clear tables and stood frozen, watching the disaster unfold. Michael was now rushing over, finally noticing the situation spiraling out of control. "Modern luxury," Clint repeated thoughtfully, as if testing the words. "And what exactly does that mean to you, Emily?" The use of her name caught her off guard. She wasn't wearing a name tag, but she quickly recovered, assuming he had heard another server use it. "It means," she declared, "that some places aren't for everyone. Our clientele expects a certain ambiance. She gestured toward a group of young entrepreneurs taking selfies with their platinum desserts. They get it. They respect what Golden Vine represents. They're not here pretending to be something they're not. The irony of her statement hung in the air. A few veteran servers exchanged knowing glances. Michael was now just steps away, his face pale. Pretending, Clint mused, that familiar half-smile returning. Interesting choice of words. Listen, Emily snapped, her patience finally exhausted. I've tried to be polite. But you clearly don't belong here. This isn't some set for one of your old westerns. This is a prestigious establishment, and I won't have you ruining the experience for our real guests. The moment the words left her mouth, Michael froze mid-step. Carlos dropped his bus tub, and the crash echoed through the suddenly silent restaurant. The elderly couple at the next table gasped audibly. But Clint's expression didn't change. He simply pulled out his phone and made a single call. Jerry, bring me the ownership papers. Yes, right now. And the renovation plans we discussed last week. He set the phone down and looked back at Emily, who was starting to realize that something had gone very, very wrong. You see, Emily, he continued in that same calm voice, I've been coming here every Friday for the past 6 months, sitting at this same table, ordering the same whiskey. Want to know why? Emily's face began to pale as the implications dawned on her. Because 6 months ago I bought this restaurant. Not for the prestige, not for the modern luxury, but because for 50 years, Golden Vine has represented something real, a place where genuine hospitality means treating everyone with respect, no matter what they're wearing or how many followers they have. The silence in the restaurant was absolute. You could have heard a napkin drop. Jerry, the longtime accountant, appeared moments later with a leather portfolio. He nodded respectfully at Clint, handed him the documents, and stepped back, trying to hide a smile. Emily stood frozen, her order pad hanging limply at her side. The reality of her situation was hitting her in waves, each realization worse than the last. She hadn't just insulted a customer, she had insulted Clint Eastwood. She hadn't just insulted Clint Eastwood, she had insulted her own boss. And not just any boss, but a living legend whose career was built on characters who stood up against the very kind of arrogance she had just displayed. Miss, Clint said, his voice carrying the same commanding tone that had earned respect over 6 decades of cinema, let me tell you a story about this place. He gestured around the dining room. 50 years ago, I came here for the first time. I wasn't famous yet. I was nobody. I was wearing a shirt pretty much like this one. The owner back then, Old Man Thompson, treated me like I was the most important guest he'd ever had. Not because of who I was, but because that's how he treated everyone. He paused, taking another sip of his whiskey. When his son wanted to sell the place 6 months ago, I bought it for one reason: to preserve that spirit. Real class isn't about designer labels or social media followers. It's about dignity, respect, and treating everyone like they matter. Carlos, still standing nearby, straightened up a little taller. The elderly couple at the next table nodded approvingly. Even some of the young influencers put down their phones, caught up in the moment. So, Clint continued, fixing Emily with that legendary steady gaze, the question isn't whether I belong here. The question is whether you understand what this place truly stands for. Emily's eyes filled with tears as her carefully constructed worldview came crashing down. But what happened next surprised everyone, especially her. I could fire you right now, Clint said, his voice gentler now. But that's not what this place is about. Instead, I am going to give you a choice. He gestured to Carlos, who stepped forward nervously. This young man tried to warn you. He recognized Menot from social media, but because he watched my films with his father, he understood something you didn't. Respect isn't about appearances. Turning to Carlos, Clint spoke with quiet authority. Son, how would you like to start training as a waiter? We could use more people who understand what real service means. Carlos's eyes widened with disbelief and gratitude. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. As for you, Emily, Clint continued, your choice is simple. You can walk out that door and find another job at a place more focused on modern luxury, or you can learn from Carlos and our veteran staff about what real hospitality means. Your call. Emily wiped her eyes, looked around at the dignified faces of the longtime staff, and made her decision. I'd like to stay and learn, sir. If you'll let me. Good choice, Clint nodded, finishing his whiskey. Michael put Carlos in charge of her retraining. As the tension in the room dissolved, the elderly couple at the next table began to applaud. Others joined in not for the celebrity in their midst, but for the lesson they had just witnessed. A reminder that true class has nothing to do with clothes or status, and everything to do with how we treat each other. Today, Golden Vine remains one of the finest restaurants in Chicago, not because of its luxury, but because of its heart. And if you stop by on a Friday evening, you might just see a man in a simple polo shirt, sitting at his usual corner table, quietly ensuring that the old values of respect and dignity live on.